Hello, Feminine Roadmappers. Welcome back to Feminine Roadmap Podcast, the podcast that helps you navigate the challenges and the changes of midlife and empowers you to live an incredible second half. If you find us on YouTube today, don't forget to subscribe and ring that bell. If you are on a podcast platform, go ahead and subscribe, rate, and share this conversation because today we are going to be talking about midlife transformation. My guest had a six-figure corporate job that she climbed that ladder because she thought that was going to be the answer to her dreams and everything was going to be perfect and joyful and blissful and wonderful. And when she got there, she began to realize it wasn't all that she expected it to be, which began her journey toward a midlife reinvention that I'm going to leave for her to share with us about. Alise Saunders is my guest today. She's a digital nomad and a travel blogger. Alise, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be with you and your tribe.
Yes, I'm excited to hear about your story. First of all, I love that picture behind you. I love to travel, right? Is that in Utah, Arizona?
Utah. So this is a picture, Arches National Park. This is the picture in the Airbnb that we're staying at right now. So we are in Moab. We've been here for a couple weeks and we'll be here for like another week or so. And then we're off to Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Wonderful. So tell me a little bit about, what I know that your journey was that you had that job and you believed the story that it was going to be the epitome of perfection and joy. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So, I grew up not having, right? So in a very impoverished situation. In fact, at one point in my life growing up, our bathroom was an actual outhouse. We didn't have an indoor bathroom. So that's like the level of the not having that I'm talking about. And so, you want what you don't have. You want, when you look out at the world, what everybody else has, where people are busy and beautifully dressed and rushing off to that job that has the status and the title, and society tells us that that's what we should be doing, right? That's the definition of success. And I never really questioned that, of course, until midlife when I started questioning everything. And so, I got on that path for myself. The definition of success was title, money, status, knowledge, right? And so when I was propelling myself through my career path, that was my goal. Eventually, I wanted to be like a vice president, or heck, why not president, of a company. And as I continued through my career progression and I finally hit that six-figure salary and I continued through those six-figure digits, I really expected like this cloud to descend from the heavens and joy and happiness to open up to me. And at the end of the day, that didn't happen. And I was naively surprised. I was still myself, full of unhealed trauma, full of beliefs that this career path was going, and money was the answer to everything in my life. And I realized that I was extraordinarily unhappy. I was working myself to death. I literally had made myself ill. I had MS. I had a compressed disc in my neck. I had arthritis, precancerous polyps already in my colon in my 30s. I was just so very ill. And I did not at that moment yet realize that it was my thoughts, my emotions, and my experience in my life around that unhappiness in what I was doing that was creating the thoughts, that was creating the physical disease or dis-ease that I was experiencing in my physical body.
It is so powerful how our bodies are impacted by the thoughts we think. It's you meet people who have a ton of money and they're the most miserable people, or you can meet people who literally have nothing and they're the most joyful people. So it's, that part is interesting in it of itself. You and I, before we hit record, I was saying, of course you believe that. That's what
Right.
we're taught, right? That if
Yes.
you chase that carrot on that rope, at some point, man, you were just going to be blissful. But what they don't tell you is what you're saying is the amount of stress, the inability to actually reach the carrot on an emotional level, because it's never enough. And that
Right.
impact on our bodies is really detrimental. I think the stress diseases, like you said, the dis-ease is becoming so common because so many of us
Yeah.
are living lives that are out of alignment, I think, with who we really
Absolutely.
are.
And we're taught that we can't change our mind.
Oh,
That,
yeah.
society says, oh, this is what you decided. You have to stick with this. Well, I'm 3 businesses in, to the second half of my life, because no, I don't. And I can't even say that I'll be a digital nomad travel blogger this time next year. Maybe I'll want to do something completely different and then do something different after that. We don't have to make a decision. We are changing. Our bodies are changing every moment of every single day. Why in the world would I have to be stuck with a decision that I made yesterday or 5 years ago or 20 years ago? I don't. I can wake up today and totally reinvent myself into somebody completely different and do something completely different.
That is a mindset shift.
It is.
That is so necessary in midlife. I feel like we naturally get that like tempo shift that kind of happens to us. And we're like, you feel kind of like almost like your shoes don't fit anymore. Like you're like, what? This is uncomfortable. And I think that's a good thing if we can, like to your point, shift up here, shift in our head.
Absolutely.
So how did you do that? Because letting go of 6 figures in the world that we live in, especially in Western culture, is like suicide to some people.
Yeah. I did it in a variety of different ways. First of all, it was a decision to choose myself, which I had never done in my life. In fact, society teaches us that we're selfish if we do that. And so, it was really about putting myself first. I was so ill. When you have MS and you wake up and you can't write your name anymore and you look severely disabled when you try and walk, and you can't bathe yourself like you used to and do the normal things that of course we all take for granted, it really gets your attention. And MS really did that for me. It was a long path to self-healing that lesion, really investigating how and why I had gotten ill. So it was the path from believing that this was some outside force, that the body just happens and this is what happens when you get older and all of this, to my thoughts and my beliefs created this illness. So that was a tremendous path and journey for me to get to that point, which then opened up my mind. Once I acknowledged that it was the job, it was how I perceived the job. I felt trapped. I felt empty. I felt powerless. I felt, it was just the hamster wheel, as they call it, of thoughts that were constantly going through my mind, were inundating my body with these negative messages. And so once I got to the point that I was finally well enough to leave, right? Because I got in this illness cycle where I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm like almost too sick to leave and too sick to stay. And so, once I got to the point of, I need radical choice changes. I have to let go of what I had always seen for myself and the expectation that society placed on me, and choose myself, my mental health, my emotional health, my physical well-being. And there was a path of progression that took me through Buddhism, meditation, right? And so it was all of these things to get me to the point of I need to sit down and focus on healing the trauma that I've either been running away from, that society told me, just move on from it. If you don't think about it, it doesn't exist. Put it in a box, put it on a shelf. There were like so many messages. And really, it was the ability to sit down and start working on that trauma that allowed me to break so many behavioral and mental and emotional thoughts that prevented me from being able to leave. And once I went through that process, I was finally able to let go of all of that and say, well, now what do I want to create for myself?
You use the word bondage, and there's different kinds. There are different kinds of bondage, right? We can be in physical bondage.
Mm-hmm.
We can be in emotional bondage, which I think many people are, which leads to that mental bondage. And so I feel like what you touched on, and I just wanted to comment on this, is what we have carried through our lives has a greater impact than we realize.
Yes.
But the hopeful piece is that it can be healed. There's a book, and I don't know if you've heard of this book, Alise. It's called The Body Keeps the Score.
Yes, it was actually part of the originating part of my journey. Was when I read that, it allowed my mind to open and expand. There were many other processes. I think her name is Louise Hay. You know, I think that she has a series of books about emotions and how it can create symptoms within the body as well. Bruce Lipton, I think, is another author that's really fantastic in explaining how that works and about how our stored emotion can actually take up like physical space. I'm paraphrasing, of course.
No, but that's the gist. Yeah. You know what? It's incredible because myself, and I've shared this before, so I'll keep it very brief, but the trauma that I had to overcome witnessing abuse in my home and being in that environment and a couple of other major things, I found that book, and I had figured out that there was a physical spot that when I was triggered, that spot, that area would react. Like that's where the hit, does that make sense? I know, I think you understand.
Totally.
So that's where the hit would be. And so I think that our bodies, because they do keep the score, your mind, your brain is a physical thing, but your mind, like the fascia. I spoke to a couple who do fascia stretching. It's a different kind of stretching. And I've known how being on the yoga mat or stretching a certain part of your body that you can release stored emotions. And it sounds crazy, you know. I happen to be a believer, a Christian, and so people think the two things are separate, but because of my belief system, I believe we're designed. We are an incredibly designed being. So we are both mental, physical, and spiritual, and all of those things are working together. And when we get out of alignment, when life happens in these traumatic ways, our bodies have this miraculous way of assimilating it into itself, if you will. And so I'm interested to hear your journey, because I know my own, and you realize how incredibly self-healing the body can be when you get these things figured out.
Absolutely.
So I'm excited.
I never thought that I would self-heal the lesion. The benefit was that nobody told me that it wasn't possible. They took that as truth. So they never spoke it to me, you know, and I'm so grateful that nobody ever said, hey, you're going to be sick for the rest of your life. You're not going to get any better. And, you know, when like, I don't know, I can't remember the exact dates, a year, 2 years later, I went in for the MRI and they couldn't even see it on the MRI. They were like, are you sure that this girl had MS? And it was a slow progression. Don't get me wrong. When you can barely stand, walk, write, bathe, to, I'm out in the world feeling like I have no symptoms whatsoever. It was a long, beautiful, miraculous journey, but I believed that I could because nobody told me that I couldn't. And I was just so determined that there was so much life ahead of me that this was not it. This was not my end, right? This was not going to take over my identity. I wasn't MS. I had MS at that moment, but I was determined to not have MS in a point in my future. And so, I believe that the incredibleness of being human is that we have emotions. My guide, Kathy, always reminds me, they're our dashboard, kind of like a car. Your car tells you when it's hot or when it's cold, when it's on empty, when it's full. Our emotions are that for us. And society teaches us to do anything and everything but to avoid our emotions, to stuff them, to not express them, to not talk about them, right? Even in a professional setting, it's not appropriate to cry. You hide in the bathroom, for heaven's sake, so that nobody will know that you're having a human moment. And so, our emotions are the key to our alignment, as you mentioned, of the body, mind, spirit. That's the key, because that emotional dashboard is what creates our thoughts. Our thoughts create our beliefs. Our belief creates our experience in our life. And so it was really a journey for me of deconstructing the beliefs that were keeping me small, that had kept me stuck, that had made me feel powerless when I really wasn't. And it was really in that process of looking at the beliefs that no longer served me, which a lot of them weren't even beliefs that I had chosen. I was given them through society, church, parents, teachers, etc. And so my whole life was constructed on somebody else's belief system. And so it was really a process of choosing my own, and what were the beliefs that I could choose that were going to make me my most powerful self. And really, it was that process that allowed me to quit that job, to open my own bookkeeping business, which I did for several years and absolutely loved. But just like that energy that you were talking about with that shoe that just doesn't quite fit, I had transformed so much trauma into permanent healing, that my filter to life had become so much clearer. And I felt this fire, this yearning to expand and take up more space in the world. And that eventually was how being a digital nomad travel blogger came to be.
That's such an incredible story. And I feel like I hear voices going, oh, that's good for her, but I just don't see it for me, because we do have paradigms, don't we? Those paradigms. So I'm excited to hear, it is interesting how you journeyed through that with an illness. It's not even just like a lot of people, it's not even that included. It's just shifting the way they feel about things.
Right.
And so I'm curious, were you involved in being in taxes or money before, and so you just went out on your own, or was it a completely new field?
So you mean as far as the bookkeeping, like creating that bookkeeping business? So I had been in my professional career, I had been a controller and human resource director for Hilton Hotel Corporation. I then also transitioned into a brand new career and became a regional director of revenue management for a luxury hospitality brand. So I had already done like what most people would say, this is my career. I had already had 3 of those. You know what I'm saying? Like I had
Yes.
already transitioned into, well, let me try this. And oh, this seems cool. Let me try that. So I guess that was already a part, even as a young woman, of who I was, like investigating and trying new things. But bookkeeping in itself, while it was very similar to being a controller, there was a lot of similar language. There, debits and credits were the
Yeah.
same, obviously. But number one, I like owning my own business was never going to be a thing for me. It was in my family where nobody was business owners, I think, except one uncle who actually told me, don't open your own business. He was not supportive. And it was just always assumed and talked about in my career path in high school and, going into college, that I would just always work for someone. And that blows my mind. So when I work with young people today, I'm like, own your own business. It's the best way to go, right? You can create the life that you're wanting, but it's that opportunity, that thought process should be open to anyone, no matter what age. And so, first I had to get over the hurdle of being my own business owner, because society trains you, oh, you're safer in a corporate job working for someone else with those benefits. It's unsafe to be out there in the world all on your own, and it's very scary and bad things can happen, which is crap. It's partially true in some ways if that's what you believe and that's what you create. But after getting over that hurdle, and I took a class, I took a class on how to do the bookkeeping and QuickBooks Online and got all my certifications. And I left my corporate job without one client, not one. It's not
Wow.
like I left and I had a replacement. When I say I woke up and decided I had to choose myself, my health was put as the top priority, not money, not status, my health. And by this time, I had become very well. And when I ventured out into that world, I put all my eggs in, I believe in myself for the very first time. I was incredibly skilled, incredibly talented in the corporate world. And it was time for me to invest in myself. And so I believed that when I stepped out, I was going to make it happen. And you know what? If I was wrong, I could go back.
Yeah.
It wasn't the end of the road if it didn't work out. Luckily, I did put all of that effort into building my own business, and eventually it was very successful. I never did have to go back, but we always think it's all or nothing. If I'm not successful, oh my God, what then? Well, you do something else. You figure it out. You go back to the old job. You pivot. It's okay. You don't have to have everything figured out, written in stone. That's the beauty of life.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the shift that you mentioned, to recognize that we are not locked in unless we feel that we were locked in. And you mentioned insurance. I feel like that's the biggest sticking point.
Yeah.
For people to leave a job. That or the retirement, the 401k.
Right. And I would say, I on my website, I have a guide about how to become a digital nomad. And I walk people through that insurance question, because you're right. The people that call me all the time, like that's their one of their top questions. And, I have a medical sharing plan. I don't have traditional insurance. It is much more empowering than my corporate insurance plan ever was. I don't have to get pre-authorizations. I'm not confined to a certain amount of, you can get that medicine, but only for this long. And, all of that goes away. I'm much more empowered to be in charge of my own health with my medical sharing plan than I ever was. Going internationally next year, Greg and I are moving to Greece for a year, and we're getting, a medical insurance plan in Greece that actually is even cheaper than the one that I'm paying for my medical sharing plan here in the States. Which, by the way, the medical sharing plan that I'm on is like 50% of what I was paying in the corporate world for my benefits. And yeah, you can have 401k as a digital nomad. You know, there are so many options that people don't realize because, again, it's not the, what's it called? It's not the motive of society to show that you can have this wild, this free, this beautiful, happy, joyous life. It doesn't fit within the, you know, what everybody wants to dictate to you is the acceptable way to live. It can be done. I'm doing it. And there's nothing more special about me than there is about you. Nothing.
You know, I've mentioned this on other topics like healing, for example, and it totally comes in alignment here. When we make a dramatic change in our life, even small changes, but the more dramatic the change, the greater the resistance can be from people around us because our shift challenges their belief system.
Yes.
It puts them off because they thought it couldn't happen. Then you do it, and now they have to face the reality that, oh my gosh, it can happen. Or, oh, she's just the one. Like, you have to create a whole new paradigm now because someone has proven your belief to be untrue.
Yeah, there just must be something special about me, right? There must be something that I have or something that I do that makes me more special in this way than somebody else. And the real truth is that the only thing distinguishing me from the people that I meet every single day that go, oh my God, I'm so jealous. Oh my gosh, I'd love to do what you're doing. Oh my gosh, I can't believe you're doing this. That would be incredible. That's my dream. I want to do that, right? We hear that constantly. And the only thing separating them from me is that I made a decision. I decided. That was the first and foremost thing, was I decided this is what I want. I claimed it. This is what I want for myself. This is the life. This is the experience. This is how I want to feel. These are the things I want to do, places I want to go, things I want to see, people I want to meet. I claimed that for myself. And when we're in that alignment, that mental, emotional, spiritual alignment that you mentioned, the universe goes, oh, okay, this is what she wants. Let's start bringing her opportunities in order to do that. Obviously, I didn't sit on my couch and it all happened for me. It's these small steps. It's the change in thinking. It's the emotions, but it's also the small steps of looking online at Airbnbs and, you know, starting to figure out that tactical plan to be able to put those things into place. So when we actually did it, when we actually got on the road, it's like, holy crap, we're really doing this. It's happening. I feel the same way about Greece. It's like, holy crap, actually meeting with the Greek consulate and filling out the application forms. And we booked our first Airbnb in Athens yesterday. You know, like, it's really happening. We're really doing this. And, you know, it still blows my mind, but it starts with making that decision and then putting those small steps, which become big things over time, into place. That's it. That's the only thing that separates me from those people, is that they think that it's not for them, that they can't do it. They have this belief system that limits them into, I need roots, I need a house, I need stuff. Who am I? Right? And I went through that. Who am I without a house full of stuff that made me feel full on the inside, right? And I can tell you, we have no home, not one. We don't have any roots. We don't have any home. We let go of the lease. We sold most of our stuff. Everything that we own fits in our car that we carry with us. And it is amazingly fun. Next year, when we go to Greece, we have to pare that down to a single suitcase. Oh my God, everything I own is going to fit in a suitcase, right? But like, that's amazing. That's absolutely amazing, because I no longer need stuff to give me value, to make me feel full inside, because self-love is now filling the holes and the spaces in my soul that I was looking for external things, that money, that status, the stuff that I collected, the massive 2-story house. I don't need it anymore. It doesn't serve me. In fact, it hinders me, right? But so many people are still stuck in that belief system that they need that for validation of other people. But when you give it to yourself, the world opens up to you. But I never could have given it to myself if I hadn't have gone through the steps of healing the trauma. That was really the big differentiator.
For you, it was, I think it's true for a lot of people. Those belief systems, as a coach, that's one of the number one things that I deal with, is helping people identify what they believe, because a lot of our suffering, I was mentioning this to my husband yesterday. I said, our expectations and or the expectations of others that we've agreed with are what cause so much of our suffering.
Absolutely.
Because we cannot control all those things you listed, except, we have difficulty controlling ourselves. Let's just be honest about that. But the greatest opportunity for us to have some semblance of, I don't know if control is the right word, but impact and influence is on our own selves, the way we think, the way we react, and other people's expectations as well as our own become cages for us, I think.
Oh, totally. I did feel that, during the process of saying, I love bookkeeping. I want to keep doing bookkeeping, but I feel like I need something else. I really realized how I had lived in this cage of beliefs that others had built my life for me. And I had unknowingly lived according to that. And, Glennon Doyle's book, Untamed, where, she really unpacks that so articulately, about living in the cage and waking up one day and finally being able to see the bars. Like I had that moment. I'm like, oh my God, the whole world is out there, but I'm right here and the door is open. The door has been open to the cage the whole time. All I have to do is step out. And it just like, it really blew my mind. And that was part of the transformation of figuring out what it was that was next for me, next for us. Greg is 66, I'm 48. And, we went through this process of, if we could reinvent ourselves, if we could be anything, do anything, go anywhere. And we just started playing in this space where there were no limits, because that's one of the first mistakes in manifesting and creating and transitioning that we do, is we place restrictions. Well, there's no point in thinking about that. I can't afford it. No point in thinking about that. That's logistically too difficult. We took all of that off the board. All we did was play in this space for months about where would we go? What would we do? Right. And every time that we were in that play space, we were always going somewhere. And then it's like, duh. Travel is obviously our heart's desire and our passion together. So let's look at that. And then it's like, okay, so what do we do with that? Are we just traveling? Are we doing something? Are we helping other people? Are we doing some sort of nonprofit? And so it took some more time of talking to the universe, listening to my heart's desire, really giving space for my inner voice, my higher self, to be able to come through. And I even had a couple of visions where I felt spirit was directly communicating with me and showing me some things that could be if I wanted to choose them. And, that was really the process of going, oh, travel blogger. Okay. Digital nomad. Like the picture continued to unfold over time. But it was really about making that space where there weren't any restrictions. Once we decided Then we were like, okay, now we need to put some plans in action that are those more tactile steps. But being that we were aligned with what we wanted already, those things were much easier. And the hurdles were not nearly as big. If I had placed those hurdles at the beginning, I would not be here. I would have come up with every reason, every excuse, everything to not do it. But once we were aligned, this is what we want. Again, it doesn't have to be all or nothing, right? It could have been, you know, a trip to a state park on a weekend. It doesn't have to be moved to Greece. It could be, you know, but once we were aligned, then everything fit into place because the universe brought those opportunities to us much easier.
I was pondering the idea that you said it doesn't have to be Greece for you. I think that's a key point. Not comparing.
Exactly.
We're so used to that. It's really shifting away from what other people are doing to what do I really want to do, regardless of the family history, the family structure, the corporate structure maybe someone grew up in, you know, or whatever, because there is a connection that has been blocked in a lot of people.
Yeah.
The messages are being like ninja blocked by everything that we've known, if you will, or believed. And so I think those baby steps that you mentioned, because really we're dropping into your life at the big step.
Yeah.
Right? We're not dropping into your life at the beginning of this journey.
Right.
And so this is one of those things as listeners are listening. Yeah, this sounds amazing, but that's because she's here. But the reason you're talking to me is because you got to hear how, right? That's the whole point, is to mentor people toward living a life of their dreams in their second half. And the thing we haven't talked about, which doesn't have to be fleshed out, is we really do have this idea that at a quote certain age, you're kind of finished. I don't know with what, but do you know what I'm saying? But it's just kind of like, oh, and I use this a lot, but you know, it's time to fade off into the sunset. Like, are you going to go sit on your porch? Are you going to, and that might work for some people, but I think there's a lot more people who have that energy that you and I have, which is, okay, now what? I'm ready for more, not because we're greedy, but because we've done X, Y, and Z. And now with life expectancy, we could live to be 80 years old. That's another 30 plus years. Now, what are you going to do?
Right. Well, somebody needs to tell my husband he was supposed to be finished with life, because at 67, you know, he's reinvented himself as a travel blogger, you know, which most people would say, oh, leave that to the 20 somethings. But, you know, we're having the time of our life. The big thing is that I woke up and realized that I had not fully lived. In fact, when I realized and had that moment where I could like almost physically see the bars of the cage that I had lived my whole life, I was like, no, like I don't want that for myself. The fact that I had to say, what would it be like to fully live? Like, that's incredibly powerful. I had no idea. I did not feel like through my 20s, 30s, you know, and I'm even in my 40s now, but that I had really started to even live at all. I had just trudged along. I had done the things that I should do. I had been the good girl that I thought that I should be. But there was no freedom. There was no wild abandonment. There was no huge risk that I was taking. There was not really even knowing what I was truly capable of, because everything had been choreographed and everything had been safe. And I was plagued with so many fears. And, you know, my whole life, honestly, was more like an albatross around my neck, drowning me than propelling me to freedom of any kind. And so, you know, it's one of those things. I'm like, okay, I'm looking at 50. You're right. I could live to 80. And suddenly I want to fully live. I want to start living now. And the farce is that people say when, if, someday. It's always tomorrow. And what I want to urge your listeners is get in touch with your heart's desire, your inner voice, your higher self, and do something today. It doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be massive. You don't have to decide to move to Greece, but just one little small thing today and one little small thing tomorrow. It really builds up, but it isn't too late, right? Because now we have all this knowledge and experience in life. Now is the time to really embrace living truly, deeply, lovingly, beautifully, joyously, passionately, living our life to its fullest. I don't want to die with shoulda, coulda, wouldas. I don't. I really don't. So this is my choice that I've made.
Mm-hmm. You use some keywords that are mulling in my mind. You used safety, fear, and freedom. Mm-hmm. And what I found interesting is most people see what you're talking about as a scary thing. Yeah. Yet we do the safe thing and are plagued with fear. Mm-hmm. And so my question, the question that begs to be asked from my side is, okay, if I'm going to feel fear anyway,
do it anyway.
Do I do it from this caged place or from the freedom place? Because in the caged place, the reality is other people are making decisions for our life, right? Like you can't just not go to work.
Right.
You're not allowed to do that.
Right.
If your body says, I need sleep, tough bananas, man, you got to go to work. And I'm not saying work is bad because for some people, that is the dream. Right. There are those people who absolutely love their corporate jobs. Like, love absolutely. Them. And then maybe within that context, it's finding something new and different within that vehicle that you're in. But that's the beauty of it. You're talking about safety and fear and freedom and fear. I'm like, I think freedom and fear makes a little bit more sense.
But the funny thing is that once I looked at those beliefs and I looked at those fears, why I had them, where they came from. Yeah. And what value they had for me in my life, they disintegrated. And I went, oh, wow, I had that fear because of this. Well, is that true? Is that mine? Was that my experience? How does that help me to live this wild and free, fully abandoned life that I'm wanting to live? Mm-hmm. It doesn't. So what can I replace that with that allows me to be my most powerful self? And that really was what allowed me to be in this place, because I wouldn't say that I am fearful. I wouldn't say that I am fearless either. But what I would say is that in evaluating those beliefs, rewriting the beliefs that I choose to be my most powerful self, is that it allows me to be in this space without fear. Honestly, I don't feel like I'm nervous. Like when I think of moving to Greece, it's like, oh, I've never lived internationally. It's a different culture. The language isn't even our alphabet. Like there's all of these things that are like so different and, maybe in my mind a little weird to me. And, that is a little unsettling, but I'm not fearful. I don't fear safety over in Greece, because what you focus on is what you attract in your life. And so if I focus on, oh my gosh, something terrible is going to happen to me, then it probably will happen to me. I can manifest that into reality with my thoughts and my emotions and my focus, right? So, I just don't have a lot of fears in my life, but I was practically like a hermit, terrified of leaving my apartment, terrified of all of the bad things that were going to happen to me in the world. And that's when I wasn't living. I was just hiding out. I was just hiding out in my own life.
What What a powerful statement. Hiding out in your own life. Maybe that's the first question we could ask ourselves. Mm-hmm. Where are you hiding out in your own life? Wow, that's incredible. So Alise, if you had 3 words of advice for my audience, what 3 things would you really want them to take away from your experience or your knowledge or your encouragement for them?
Anything is possible. Do the work to heal your trauma because your life is on the other side of it, and evaluate the beliefs because it's your beliefs that are keeping you stuck in the repetitive cycles of fear and limiting you from getting in touch and creating your most powerful self.
Oh my gosh, I 100% agree with all of those things. Alise, how can people follow your journey and stay in touch with you?
Untamedsoul.info is my website. There we have lots of free resources. We have digital nomad travel guides, an ebook, How to Become a Digital Nomad, and even a course on beliefs, which is what we were talking about, so that you can really take the time in a guided fashion to really dissect your own belief system, where it came from, and how you can transform your beliefs into allowing you to create your most powerful self. So there's tons of resources on there. And plus we take amazing photos of gorgeous places like Utah. So you can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook, all that good stuff.
And you're at Untamed Soul on all of these places?
Yes. Tales from an Untamed Soul is our handle for Instagram and Facebook.
Awesome. Well, Alise, I want to thank you so much for showing up today with passion and excitement and empowerment, because it's so wonderful to have someone cross your path that is living in such an aligned place that your light just shines so bright, and it's like a moth to a flame. I can only imagine that when people see your face, they're going to be so compelled to take action in their own life because of the passion and the purity of your message, and the belief that you have for yourself and for others is so magnetic. Thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you so much for allowing me to be here.
It is my pleasure. Friends, today, if you are finding us on YouTube, all you have to do is look down below, and the links to Alise will be right there for you. If you happen to be driving and you're listening to the podcast, head on over to www.feminineroadmap.com/episode 304. The show notes will be there, and all the links will be there as well. If you are finding this message today and you have that little stirring in your spirit, or maybe that stirring has been there and now it's being fanned into a little bit of a flame, hold some space for that. Hold some space for that flame and that stirring. Get curious about it. You don't have to make a big leap today. But friends, midlife is the most powerful season that we have been given in this timeline, from birth to passing. And that dash in between, we get to decide how that is lived. And so I would encourage you to take some time and just hold a space for that little inkling in your spirit, that flame you might feel in your soul, and figure out how you can begin to add a little bit of that into your life. To Alise's point, it doesn't all have to happen today. Just take a baby step. Allow the possibility to exist in your spirit if you're resisting it. If you're like Alise and you're like, that's it, I am done, we would love to hear your story as well. So please reach out to her and to me and let us know this passion journey you are on, because you, my friend, were meant for a purpose. You have gifts, you have abilities, you have things that the world needs to see and experience. And the freer you are, the more those gifts can leak out and impact the world. Thank you so much for being with us today. We look forward to sharing more inspirational people and stories and strategies with you in the weeks to come. Take care, my friends. Bye-bye.